3, 2, 1.
And we're back.
You know, we're going to do the cold open?
Yeah, Jason wanted me to do a cold open. He's like, why do you have to go through this whole like intro and all this other stuff?
Yeah, welcome to the podcast. No, let's just talk.
So we're going to get right into it. We are pretty pumped today because we have someone we tried to get on the pod. We've been, I don't know how, it's been like since last fall, I think. And we struck out once. We had like a really weird feed and we couldn't get the audio to work very well. And so we're on round 2, but I think this one's going to work. So we're pretty excited. Someone that I reached out to because I started kind of following you and what you were starting to put out, especially on social media, and immediately coming from my background of strength conditioning, I could see that, you know, the things that you were doing and the things that you were starting to put out just kind of spoke to me as far as training, shooting a bow, integrity, strength, all these other things, and you know, you've grown by leaps and bounds in you know, the last couple of months. So we're pretty excited to have Christian Williams on the podcast today. He is the owner of Archery Strong, and we're pumped to have you on. We're going to get maybe a little nerdy today and talk about shooting bows. So how are you doing today?
Get nerdy. I'm going to sit back here and enjoy this.
Yeah, I love getting nerdy. I love this stuff, and I'm glad to finally be on here with you guys. I certainly owe you guys a thank you for being as patient as you have been. I was actually, it's kind of ironic because the last time we tried to do this, I was driving to my dad's farm to hunt, and it didn't work because the cell reception was so bad. And today, ironically, I was also driving from my house to my dad's farm, and I was just thinking about that on the way here. And thankfully, we were able to connect tonight while I'm here at the farm, actually on good internet, on a computer. So I'm excited for the conversation. I, again, thank you guys for your patience.
Yeah, no problem. I think we've learned over time that these things can be so finicky, and we never really know. Like, we always kind of cross our fingers. I mean, we've actually had some of them that we thought were fine, and then you end up getting to the end of it, and you're like, oh, crap, like the feed was bad or something. And so hopefully everything will go smoothly tonight, and we'll get this thing knocked out. So first of all, let's jump right in. I want to talk to you about, you know, your background. I know you have, you know, a background that obviously speaks to your expertise. Kind of talk about, you know, obviously you're a hunter, and so where you identified a need, and, you know, I think there's some similarities to kind of where I sat with, you know, where we started H3O, which was a training component, a physical demand component, a thing that spoke to what you do for a living, that now has become something that, you know, you've kind of created in Archery Strong.
Yeah, absolutely. At a very young age, I got into the outdoors, and not too much longer after that, when I was a young teenager, I suppose, I got into fitness and weightlifting. And, you know, that's just developed kind of as a normal story. I started doing a lot of different things with fitness and trying different things. And, again, was always involved in the outdoor and shot a bow from, you know, when I was young, when my dad had got me one. And, you know, as I went throughout life, I really started to feed more into fitness and more into, you know, physically demanding things and using my body and everything in that route. And it was towards the end of senior year in high school. It was one of those instances where you got a dumb 17-year-old, and, you know, parents are putting pressure on, what are you going to do for college? What are you going to go for? And I thought, man, I really like this fitness thing. I really like the whole working out idea. I'll go for exercise science, you know, and I had no idea. I had no plans, and I'm very, very blessed for how it all panned out. But I went through college and I studied exercise physiology, bachelor's degree, went on to get a master's degree. And through, I guess it would have been at the end of my sophomore year, I ended up getting a job at a sports injury and sports performance center. And there I was, or had a title of movement specialist and corrective exercise specialist. And that was basically the bomb that exploded into everything that allowed Archery Strong to develop. Day in and day out, I was assessing shoulders and assessing other things in the body, looking for dysfunctions within the body, whether that be lack of flexibility, range of motion, stability, movement patterns, etc., and then prescribing corrective exercises, strength training, etc., to fix the issue that I would identify through the assessment. So it was find the problem, fix the problem, and I did that for a handful of years, a number of years, and that was just invaluable experience. And somewhere along the way, I started to think about, is there a need for this in archery? Is there a way to connect this into archery? Is there any value here? Right. And I started to think and started to experiment for myself in doing some different things that would benefit me in shooting a bow, just from a shoulder integrity, shoulder health standpoint, a strength standpoint. And from there, kept working with it, kept playing with it, kept thinking about ways that I could get this out to other people that would benefit them and bring value to them. And fast forward a couple of years, and now I'm doing this full-time, working with archers, whether it be for pain relief or strength building or just performance and integrity of the shoulders. So it's been a fun journey, and there's lots of bits and pieces to the story, but that's kind of everything in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Sounds very similar to somebody I know.
Yeah.
So my background is in professional baseball, and I do something very similar to kind of how you started there, is that, you were working in a field where you saw a bunch of arm injuries and trying to figure out how to fix them. I'm like, that's pretty much how I built my baseball training business. And then as I started getting into archery, thanks to Joel, I started going, you know what? I do a lot of arm exercises. I wonder if these would be applicable in the archery world. And here we are, right? So we came across your Instagram, I guess, in our as we were gathering up outdoor accounts and other people that we wanted to follow. And I think one of the things that spoke to me was, I love your 3D cutouts where you overlay the images of the body and the musculature on top of the archer. Is that something where you're looking for stock images and uploading, or do you have somebody that draws those? Because they're pretty much fit to a T.
Oh man, the frustrating hours I spend looking for the perfect stock image or Google image.
So you lack artistic skills, what you're telling me.
I certainly do not draw them. I don't have anybody that draws them. No, it's a matter of just finding the couple images that go best together and illustrate the principle that I'm trying to show.
Yeah, but I think they're really cool because it does give you some insight. We talk about the shoulder all the time and throwing and using, your rotator cuff and stabilizing, and how to stabilize the joint and the different exercises that go along with it. And I think, you've basically hit on that way before I got there. So kudos to you for getting there before I did. But I enjoy the heck out of those, mostly because that's something I think that most people don't really think about, when they're thinking about holding a bow or drawing a bow.
Sure.
They're not thinking about what all is involved in that process. Right. They just think, oh, I hold it here, I pull here, and I hit this button, and it goes boom. But there's so much more that goes into it. The shoulder is such a complex joint, and obviously you two can speak way more to that because you've got the degrees and more of the experience to it. But I just, I know from a throwing perspective, I know how complicated it is. I had shoulder surgery myself, so I kind of more intimately understand it, only because I had to get it fixed and repaired. But I think it's a really cool avenue to go down to give people just a total understanding of the mechanics of it and what goes into it.
Yeah, and it's awesome to hear where you're coming from, because one of my ultimate goals is to kind of bridge the same gap that's been connected in baseball and other sports too to archery. And for whatever reason, archery is just really behind. And I'm thankful for it, I guess, to be able to bring some of this information to archery. But if you look at baseball is the perfect example, as far as, back in the day, it was, hey, you threw a ball a lot, you threw a ball every day, and that's just what you did, and you keep doing that until you can throw hard and throw far. But we've come to this point in baseball, and you can speak to this too, but we've come to this point in baseball, and again, other sports, where we're thinking a little more outside of the box. as far as, hey, what does that shoulder have to do to be able to throw repeatedly? Hey, what do we need to do to make sure that this individual can throw, throw hard, throw multiple days a week for months on end, etc. And that's a similar concept that I want to, or have been trying to bring to archery, is that it is easy to just say, well, you line up, you set up, you lift, you pull, and you let go, or simplify, as far as you want. And of course that is the case, but at the same time, what really has fueled this passion for me is seeing how much I love archery, and then how much other bow hunters and target archers and different people love archery, that we're seeing people have to pull back from it, or stop shooting, or shoot less, or whatever it may be, because of shoulder issues or issues that arise because the shoulders aren't equipped and up to par with what they need to be able to do to shoot a bow. And I want to bridge that gap to see what can we do to make sure that these archers can shoot more, can shoot the way they want to for as long as they want to. And again, I just think that's a cool parallel with baseball, that we have that right there, and we have that in this conversation.
Yeah, I think it's as science and technology and all those things kind of start to infiltrate all sports, right? You start to look at something and go, well, how can I do this better? Or how can we build it more efficient? Or in your case, how can we build strength or stability in that joint that we maybe didn't know in the past? And that's kind of we work with that dichotomy a lot in baseball, because it's very black and white, like you touched on it, where it's like the old guys used to say, well, just pick up the ball and throw it as far as you can. I'm like, that's great, but we can't do that all the time if somebody's got dysfunction in there. We've got to correct those things, and then how do we build the strength? How do we keep the proper mechanics? And as data and science have really infiltrated baseball, we've seen more of a pushback from the old school guys, but we've also seen an acceleration in performance at the highest level. So it's a natural evolution to kind of work its way into all these other avenues of life. Yeah.
I mean, it really is just innovation, I suppose, at its core. And obviously it happens more quickly and more efficiently in some places than others. But that's where it's been fun. It's been a fun journey, challenging, of course, but I think there is a lot of value here, and it's been really cool to see it pay off for the different people I've worked with and talked with. So.
Yeah, and I think that the interesting part too is you look at it, like obviously we're both kind of scrolling through your webpage, and I look at stuff, and the image that's on there with the cutout and all that stuff that we just talked about, and I look at the guy holding the bow, and I go, look at how far the bow has come, right? And as you guys were talking, I'm sitting here thinking about simple things like for us in Colorado, like I had a new bow last year, and there's restrictions on what your let off can be and some of those things. Yeah. And so like in my head, that kind of came to mind right away, where I'm like, are those things for you, like for example, like we can only be at 80, like 80% on the let off here, and some states let you at 85, and you can have, that's a whole other conversation. But are any of those things part of what you preach or teach to people, that maybe are strategies as far as like training to improve their ability to be more consistent? Do you get into that stuff at all, or do you strictly say, hey, when it comes to actually picking up the bow and doing your thing and working on shot consistency, or are you more just focused on the actual integrity and function and stuff like that of the shoulder and the upper body and those things?
If I want to just clarify your question so I can make sure I answer it correctly. So are you asking, do I also address kind of the performance and consistency side of things, as well as the integrity and health side? Yeah. Am I getting that right? Yeah, absolutely. I consider my approach to be kind of three beasts, so to speak. Number one is pain relief. So someone who's already in pain, what do we need to do with that shoulder to relieve that pain? Then number two is pain and injury prevention. So we're talking about the health, function, and integrity of the shoulder. What does that shoulder need to do, and what does it need to keep doing to be able to prevent itself from having any sort of pain or injury, et cetera? And then the third component, I think, is what we're talking about here, and that is what I'll say is like a performance component.
Right.
As far as what can we do to the body behind the bow, right? The machine behind the machine, or the machine behind the bow. What can we do there that maximizes the working parts so that it is brought up to its highest potential? And then we can start to put the cherry on top as far as the, you know, the mental side of things, the technique side of things. I really look at the consistency, this performance side that we're talking about as the physical foundation to archery, meaning, you know, there's a lot of different ways to go with it, but simply, I actually just got off a call with the mother of a young archer who, this archer's very good with her technique. She's been shooting a while. She understands the technique side of things, the mental side of things, but she just lacks some of the physical capabilities, meaning stability in the front shoulder, the ability to anchor her shoulders down. She lacks those things, and at that physical foundational level, we can do a lot there to bring her physical capability up to everything else, the mental, the technique, etc. So when it comes to this thought of consistency and performance and shooting, it's really foundational as far as the physical approach and making sure that the physical capabilities are in line with what the body needs to do to shoot that bow.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it totally makes sense that, you know, that there has to be a multifaceted approach to it, right? In that, you know, you're looking at both ends of the spectrum as far as, you know, the gear itself, right? And I think we always talk about it, you know, the difference between, you know, the arrow and the Indian, right? And usually it's the latter of the two that is to fault. Although there are obviously, when you get out in the woods, and especially like how we hunt, you know, being up in, you know, altitude and the amount of hiking and things like that we do, you know, like I had an experience this year where somehow, you know, my rest, there's a small tensioner, and the rest basically didn't come up. And we were shooting, you know, target shooting, and all of a sudden I went, wait, what the heck's going on here? Like, there's no way I missed by that far. Although I'm not the best shot in the world, I will gladly admit that.
You practice a lot.
I do practice a lot, but I was like, I don't think I missed by that far, because it was like going in the ground at like 20 yards away or something like that. So for the most part, usually it is something within us that we're either doing well or doing poorly. And And I think that, as you said, I look at things in terms of integrity of, you know, the joint or joints in this case, right? And there's so many things when you look at, you know, the front hand, for example, right? And, you know, the positioning of the hand at the front end can be, you know, your downfall before anything else, you know, and then you just work your way back to the shoulder. And so of all of those things, you know, if the stars don't align very well, you know, if you're talking about shooting at 40 and 50, and sometimes for us, you know, it may be 55 or 60, guess what? Your window of error is so small, because the further that you go out, the more you have to have all of those things in, you know, in order for the execution of a good shot. And in most cases, that, you know, for most of us, odds are you're going to get one opportunity. And, you know, and it comes down to maximizing that opportunity. And if you don't prepare, and if you don't do things, and that's where, you know, for me as a hunter, my kind of aha moment came with all this too. Is like, I had been I've been hunting elk up here in big game for almost 20 years, and I'm going, wait a minute, all this preparation that I'm doing to prepare for this is to try to make sure that I maximize that one opportunity. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, this is what I do for a living. Why am I not like trying to share this information with other people and try to build what I believe, you know, at some point will be the first kind of evidence-based physical training piece that will include the metabolic side. And we're taking a lot of parallels from what the military does at high altitude and some stuff like that. And utilize that as a way to maybe be a little bit better than the guy that goes, let's just go out and truck around for a little while and see how it goes, you know. You're putting way too much money and effort and time into, you know, doing these endeavors to really, you know, like for me, I'm like, no, I'm not putting all that on the line to not be prepared, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's like you've said right there, there's so many different components that are at play there, whether it's your physical conditioning, whether it's your equipment, whether it's, the health of your shoulders to be able to shoot, whatever it might be. And exactly like you said, with an endeavor like that, there's such a small margin for error that anywhere you can pick up those 1%, right, and make them work in your favor is where I'm all in. And this, this is just one piece. Obviously, there's so many important things that go into, are ultimately harvesting a bull or, a whitetail or whatever it might be. And it's, I think, stacking those odds in your favor.
Yeah.
So speak real quick to, obviously it seems like the online strength training kind of platform, like a couple of guys have tried it, at least in the hunting communities. Speak to some of the challenges that you find, doing this kind of thing and trying to convince, a weekend hunter or somebody like that.
Tom
like,
from
hey,
Missouri.
Yeah, like that you are, that you're there to provide some value to them, and and some of the difficulties in doing distance learning with with guys in this kind of situation.
Yeah. As you were asking that question, there's two big things that pop into my mind. The first thing is that as I have developed the training system I use and continue to develop it, I'm thinking about things as far as exercise selection and the effectiveness of exercises and progressions and all these different things. But one of the most important things that I've really tried to consider is the accessibility of the training, and maybe I should say the ease of the training. How can I cut down on as many possible barriers to make it so that this is something somebody can get into and they can do it and they can do it well. Yeah. Because there can be a lot of barriers. I've worked. It's funny you said right there. You said something like Tom from Missouri or something, and I work with a gentleman. He's from North Carolina. He's an awesome country dude, and he really has never worked out in his life, but. And he's one of the hardest workers, most consistent workers that I've ever worked with. And it speaks to his work ethic and me trying to make it so that someone like him or anybody else can get into this training, do it consistently, and do it well. So that's one of the big things is accessibility of the training. So, that's everything from the videos that I'll shoot, how I explain things, how I lay things out, the programs I design, the way things are put together, how people can follow it, communicate with me, all those different things. So that's a challenge, but a very important one to the accessibility of the training. So that's the big one. And then the other one is, and I think this plays into a lot of different things, but the other one is just a matter of priority. I get messages all the time where I try to help people as much as I can and give them the information they need, but I can really tell when someone just will reach out to me and they just want a really quick fix, kind of one and done, the
American way.
It sounds oddly familiar to what we do here too.
Yeah,
it's the instant result generation where it's like, well, I can do it on my phone. Why can't my body do the same thing?
Yeah, exactly. And, and I think, we're all guilty of it. But when it comes to something like improving in archery or especially relieving pain, there's got to be a lot of priority there. And there's got to be a lot of ownership in the process. So it's very evident when someone comes to me and they're having an issue or need to improve something, and they're kind of, on the fence about how interested they actually are in doing anything about it. And then I'll get some of the most motivated people that are, truthfully, they're more motivated than I am in certain ways, that they come in and they will do absolutely everything that I ask. They will do it, to the 200%. It's just very clear with people like that they're willing to do the work. They want to get better, and that's what it takes. So I think two of the biggest things is making this accessible for people. And then also, it's a matter of priority, and you can't. It's like the saying, something along the lines like, you can only help someone if they want to be helped, type of deal.
Right.
I can, in another cliche old man saying, something like, I can give you the hammer, but I can't force you to hammer the nail type of deal. I have the tools, I have the information, and I have all the desire in the world to help people. And I love it when people are ready to jump in and do the work.
Yeah, well, I know. Like we did a podcast recently with Gene Coleman, and he kind of had a snippet of that where he said, you can't microwave success, right?
That's a great way to put it.
And anybody that's ever picked up a bow knows that it just doesn't work that way. And you see so many people out there now that preach, obviously you can look at a guy like Cam Haynes, run, lift, shoot, do it every day, all that kind of thing. And that's just like anything. It's easier said than done. We're at the start of a new year, and everybody has these high aspirations that they're gonna, I'm gonna raise the bar on all these things. But life gets in the way, and kids and family and work and all these other things, and all of a sudden you realize oh crap, I haven't touched my bow in 2 months.
Oh shoot, season's in a month. We gotta shoot.
And so. It's like anything, you don't become good by, just buying a more expensive bow. It's still the...
But that's the easier thing to do, right?
Bow companies love that.
This just popped into my head, and I'm certainly not trying to cast judgment on anybody, but it does kind of paint this picture. I a couple of years ago was at the Total Archery Challenge, which you guys are probably familiar with, and the listeners are probably familiar with, and I was just amazed at how busy the Mountain Ops booth was, and seeing the people that were interested in some of the supplementation and the different things that they offer. Certainly they have some good products, but it's just man, it's so easy to buy a new bow or buy a supplement or try to modify your arrows. Meanwhile, there's other things that you can do that are going to be more work, but are going to pay off too. But it's like you said, the microwave fixes and the stuff that's real quick to try to provide some benefit or try to up their game. And a lot of the stuff just doesn't work that way.
So I know that you, I looked at your story. I think it might have been as recent as yesterday, and you were kind of doing a bunch of Q&A. And within the Q&A, people actually, fired some good questions that, I kind of watched through a bunch of them. And just for people that may be watching, was kind of talked about integrity, right? And talk about the difference between which maybe is more important in your mind between whether it be a stability component or a mobility component or whatever that might be. In maybe let's kind of dig into, I kind of said we'd get nerdy. Maybe let's start doing a little bit of that here.
Yeah, you guys nerd away, dude.
And talk a little bit about some of what you see, and we'll just say, someone who's apparently healthy, right? Like they for the most part, they don't have any shoulder pain. They pull their bow back, and you like I look on your webpage, right, and you have an assessment, and which I assume obviously would include being able to see some of those things and trying to identify like, hey, these are some things that I think maybe help you. Talk through some of that, like where do you start in that process to kind of start narrowing down some things where you say this is the first line of defense that maybe is going to be the most impactful? Because I think that's where a lot of us start when we, like you mentioned early on, solving problems, right? Like there's a problem here, I'm going to try and fix it. And I think in our nature and what we do for a living, like that's what we do a lot of. Like I'm going to try and find the things that maybe are going to be the lowest hurdles to clear, and we're going to start there, right? What's your process as you start getting into that?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that influences what I want to do with the shoulders and what I want to make sure other archers can do with their shoulders is looking at archery and what it is demanding and requiring, right? So what I mean by that is if we look at archery as a whole and what we're doing there as far as shooting repetitively, the challenge in archery is mostly about handling repetitive load as we draw, shoot, draw, shoot, draw, shoot over and over and over again. Particularly in the bow shoulder, as that bow shoulder has to hold solid, it has to stabilize on a micro level, as I call it, down deep in the joint, and then on a macro level throughout the entire shoulder girdle. The draw shoulder has to stabilize in the joint as it's passing through different positions of rotation as you're drawing back, engaging the shoulder blade, squeezing that back to make your draw, and then to hold at full draw, back tension, etc. All of these things are, again, handling repetitive load from that bow. So when we look at these the demands of archery, that a lot of that is what is influencing the things that we need to see in the shoulders, and the things that we need to make sure are up to par in the shoulders, making sure the shoulders are equipped to do those things. You had mentioned the question that I had answered today. I think the question was something like, should I be working on flexibility or strength, or flexibility and stability?
Yeah, something.
Yeah, and my answer to that was, or I would say the thing that influenced my answer there is looking at archery, range of motion or flexibility is not I'll say it's not the most common limiting factor, or it's not a limiting factor to a very high degree or very often, meaning that rarely does someone have an issue in just raising their bow shoulder. There is a little bit more flexibility tied in with the draw shoulder as far as needing to draw, but archery itself isn't an activity that demands a lot of flexibility like going overhead with a barbell would be, or like a gymnast would need on rings or bars. There's not a ton of flexibility component there. So we go back to looking at archery and saying, hey, handling that repetitive load and consistently encountering that repetitive load is something we need to be able to handle. So that's really where we go to stability in the shoulder. We go to strength in the shoulder, again, on a micro level down deep in the joint, and then throughout a more macro level or a bigger level throughout the entire shoulder girdle. Now, that's not to say that, you know, it's all one and none of the other. There is certainly a little bit of both, but we're mostly focused on that stability, strength side of things. So when I'm assessing the shoulder, I still like to look at all of those different components. What is the range of motion? Is there any restriction there? Is there any lack of passive range of motion, active range of motion? What do those look like? How do they compare to one another? Then we go to stability. How is this person able to get into position? Can they find position? Can they hold position? Can they execute movement patterns with their shoulder blades? Are there positions or movements that are painful? Why are they painful? There's a lot of different questions there, but going back to the start, is people will often ask, you know, what are some good stretches I can do, or what should I do for stretching? And I will often try to steer people away from that mindset because, again, archery does not require an excessive amount of flexibility. Some in the draw shoulder, certainly, but by and large, I'm more concerned about the stability in that shoulder blade, the strength of the musculature holding and moving that shoulder blade, the rotator cuff, stabilizing that joint, and then further on out from the shoulders.
Yeah, I think for me, I always am really kind of analyzing as I'm drawing and pulling and you know, focusing on that you know, stabilization in that front shoulder, and what do you see as some of, you know, like for me personally, I know that I have to be very cognizant of, you know, keeping that front shoulder stable and not allowing it to collapse, right?
Sure.
And I think that, you know, even regardless of anything, like, I mean, I would say that I don't lack enough strength. It's more of a cognitive piece in terms of being able to maintain that, right? And I think then that starts to speak to the other side of the fence, which is, I'm sure you have plenty of people that, you know, you assess or whatever, and you say like, well, from a very external, you know, kind of topical standpoint, you shouldn't have any problem being able to do that. What are some of the things that maybe you do in terms of cueing or whatever? Because I think that that's a big thing we talk about in terms of coaching, right? Which is utilization of, you know, whether it's internal or external cueing and those types of things in order to try and give people feedback to be more consistent in positioning.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is a huge component. You know, I will for simplicity, I'll label that as like a control component, right? Being able to control the shoulders and manipulate the movement and the position of the shoulders. So that's a great question and example, because if we take somebody that, like you said, maybe they are apparently healthy, they're fairly strong, they're fairly flexible and mobile in the shoulder and in the upper body. There's no outward limitations there or compensations there. There's not really any dysfunction that I see on an outward level. You can take someone like that that has a good canvas, so to speak. Like I said, pretty good strength, pretty good mobility, but they may have, number one, a lack of awareness on how to move and position their bodies, and then a lack of control in how to move their bodies and position their bodies. Yeah. Because just because somebody has a good level of strength and a good level of flexibility doesn't necessarily know that they really know how to use those components. Those are like the tools, so to speak, or again, I'll call it like a canvas, right? You've got a nice clean canvas to work with, but okay, what are we going to do with it? And how are we going to use it? So that's where it really comes down to, again, awareness of position and then control of the shoulders. So there is a lot of drilling there that has to happen through particularly what I will use as far as corrective exercises, and giving them different experiences with their shoulders and with their upper body that allows them to practice finding positions, practice movement patterns, develop awareness for, hey, where are my shoulders at? Where are my shoulders going? How are they moving? How are they positioned? And then control of the shoulders, giving them experiences and opportunities to move and control their shoulders. So I'm saying, hey, I want to stabilize that bow shoulder, and I've got my hand out on that bow on that full draw. How can I keep that bow up in elevation, but how can I separate my shoulder down from that elevated arm? Something as simple as that, separating what the hand is doing from what the shoulder is doing, is a lot of times a matter of that awareness and that control. So what experiences and opportunities, again, outside of shooting, can we have to develop that awareness and control so the archer can best use their shoulders, best use their body, find those positions, execute those movements, etc. You know, the cueing, the internal and external cueing, like you were just talking about, is a big component of that, not only in corrective exercises when someone's doing scap work to practice their control and position of the shoulder blades. What are they thinking about? What am I telling them to get them into the right position and ultimately achieve the goal that we're trying to achieve for that individual? So I would say majority of the time, I really like external cues. I find that people will relate and respond to external cues better. Yeah. For those that don't know what that necessarily refers to. And if we're talking about shoulder blades, internal cue would be something like engage the muscles on the inside of your shoulder blade, or contract those muscles on the inside of your shoulder blade, or get your shoulder blade to crash into your spine, where an external cue might be something like pinch a pencil between your shoulder blades. Right.
Yeah, and that's, thanks for kind of elaborating on that, because I think a lot of people that maybe watch and don't necessarily understand that world, and the interesting part about that is like from a training perspective, we know, a friend of mine like Nick Winkleman, who's basically done so much work in this neighborhood, that talks about the effectiveness of how those things from a coaching and training side of the world really affect positive, more either more impactful outcomes. And it's no different when we start talking about it in this context, which is everybody, when they go through their shot process, probably has one or two or three things that they go through, or a checklist of things in their head that they try to utilize to tell themselves in order to try and develop that consistency, right? And so the utilization of some of those things are very helpful. And I know for me, I try to work through a process that has some similarity to that. And the awareness factor is big, like you said, because if you take, like your guy from North Carolina, like he's never trained, he's admittedly telling you that, but he's putting some emphasis and some intent behind what he wants to do, those are things where you have to figure out, like, what are the things that you say, because you're not in the room with the guy. You can't just be like, hey, do this. I'm going to just show you this. You have to find a way to communicate effectively enough for them to understand how you want them to be able to execute and come up with a meaningful impact in their shooting ability or their shooting consistency or their positioning or whatever that might be. So, I think that's huge. And it kind of speaks to Jason's question, which is, those are the challenges where you're sitting in your position from a computer or whatever, and you're either reviewing video or on the phone with somebody and trying to get a point across of how you're going to be beneficial.
What I'm feeling right now from 1,000 miles away.
Right.
Yeah. You know, I'm very honest with people that doing this remotely is a blessing in the sense that I can work with people from Scotland, India, Australia. I have clients from those places now, and I can reach people and help people that I otherwise wouldn't be able to. But I'm very honest that I just about every single time would rather have somebody right in front of me, hands-on, that I'm working with them right there, and to be able to cue them and manipulate them actually with my hands on them. That is the ultimate and best way. But we're trying to achieve best of both worlds, right? Work with people who need the help and want the help, while trying to cut down as many barriers as possible. Barriers to, how can I get this person to move correctly? How can I get this person to understand this concept or this principle? And there's a lot of troubleshooting there for sure. But it's just the process and the challenge that is something that I try to tackle often and every day, really.
Yeah.
So I've got a question for you.
Nerding out you guys are going to do right there?
No, I've got a question for you. So,
words or nothing.
You know, obviously, I'm not an archer. I don't. The last time that I shot a bow was
Scotty. Get out of here! You're not even an archer.
No, the last time I shot a bow was probably in like Cub Scouts.
Yeah, but you shot a lot of guns, so
yeah. But you know, there's not a huge market, or there's not a ton of professionals looking at this sport or this endeavor compared to, you know, speed and agility training for football or speed and agility training for soccer and stuff. So what are some of the resources that you look to when you compiled your programs together, your exercise selection, you know, because for me personally, I love diving into all the different journals and reading, you know, the EMG scores for different exercises on different muscles. Like what was your process for creating your program?
Yeah, good question. I do myself really like different things like the research articles. Actually, tomorrow I'm going to be posting a cool one that was talking about some shoulder blade musculature. So I like things like research articles. I like some of the movements related and strength and conditioning type textbooks. Of course, relying on a lot of my knowledge from studying in school, as far as especially anatomy. Those things tie in a lot, but the main source and the main thing that's influenced and informed a lot of the stuff that I use is the day in, day out practical application that I got for the handful of years I worked at that sports injury center and sports performance center that I was talking to you about. Seeing how the actual individual was able to work with that exercise, respond to this exercise. They did well with this one, didn't do well with that one. That practical knowledge makes up the vast majority of what I like to use. I think that, of course, the research-based work is very important. Again, I like to go back to the anatomy a lot and some of the textbooks a lot. But there are so many things that I've been able to gather from actually watching that shoulder, trying to control that shoulder, testing and trying out the different exercises with the shoulder, and seeing how people are able to work with them either successfully or unsuccessfully. that was just totally invaluable. That certainly has been the most important component. And then continuing to move forward, seeing how people respond and how they do with the different progressions, the different exercises, and different training plans that I'll put together. Getting feedback from that and seeing what works and what doesn't work. Like most things, there's absolutely some trial and error that goes on, and found a lot of things that don't work and some things that, or a lot of things, that don't work and some things that do work, and taking the good, modifying the bad things, the things that don't work, and then just always trying to learn, always trying to progress, always trying to refine and kind of whittle down what's going to be best and what's going to be most effective for the individuals I'm working with. But I'm definitely a huge believer in the hands-on practical experience. Just again, every day seeing how that individual or different individuals would respond to exercises was huge.
Do you pull a lot of information from the folks working at the USOC and like the archery team there?
No.
Huh?
No, I do not. Thanks for asking.
Do you have a home base? Obviously, obviously where you live, but do you have like a home gym where people, if they want to come into town and train with you, maybe for like a month, they can do that and then go home and do their online programming, or are you strictly just an online base?
Yeah, no, I do have people that I will meet in person or have met in person. I actually just moved in August, so I'm in a new area now. When I was in my original area, I had a bow shop and a gym that I would work out of, and I would meet some archers there or work with some archers either at the bow shop or the gym. But like I said, I've moved a couple of months ago, so I'm in a new area, and I have linked up with a bow shop there. And I hope to link up with a gym and maybe a couple other bow shops in the area. But it is vast majority has been online.
Yeah. So if I were to throw one at you, which is, what do you think is the most common, whether inefficiency or problem that maybe is, you see more than anything else in terms of, not from a technical standpoint of someone's, positioning or whatever, but more so like, what do you think is probably the most common thing that you see from whether it's a strength perspective or whatever, where you go, this is, old hat. This is my first go-to, and where most people are, the most inept.
Yeah, I'd have to pick three things, if that's all right.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I can't say I can narrow it down to one. The first one would be that there is a big push in archery in ideal textbook form, meaning that there's kind of this is what everybody needs to look like. This is the ideal. This is the one-size-fits-all form. And you guys would know better than just about anybody that we see variations in movement patterns and positions across all sports. I guess the first one I'm kind of going to here is that I see so many people trying to force themselves into positions or movement patterns that don't work for them.
Yeah.
Where they want to look this way, they want to move or draw this way or whatever it might be, in that position or movement pattern just doesn't work for them. The example I always give is I've coached a handful of Olympic weightlifting seminars and coached in different gyms and strength and conditioning clinics. And my example is always, if I line 10 people up at the squat rack, every single one of them is going to look similar on a general level, right? We're going to see bend or flexion at the knee. We're going to see some flexion at the hip. We're going to see a little posterior shift, obviously a little bit on the torso if we're looking at the back squat, etc. But you're going to see a little bit more foot flare in one person than another. You're going to see one person a little bit narrower and the next person beside them a little bit wider. You're going to see someone with a little bit more of an inclined torso because they have a lack of ankle mobility versus someone who can be more upright because they do have more ankle mobility, etc. So just in that example where we see the same general, it's a squat, right? But we see variations in the movement patterns and the position based on that individual structure and based on that individual function. Same thing in archery, where we see kind of the same general style of shooting a bow, right? I put my bow arm and bow shoulder out. I then draw with my other arm, but there is going to be a little bit of variation from individual to individual. So I see a lot of people trying to force movement patterns and positions that don't work for them. That would be the first one. The second one is essentially a lack of tolerance, particularly in tendons and muscles, we'll just say. Whereas, like we said, archery is largely about handling repetitive load. And we know that it varies person to person how much load and stress the individual can handle within their tendons and within their muscular system. Just simply don't have the tolerance in their tendons to handle the amount of repetitive load that they're undergoing. Especially for those individuals that they may only shoot and that's the only thing they do. Some people will be okay in that position, but some people, if they're shooting and they're not bringing tendon, the muscular system, and everything else up to par, they start to develop an irritation once they pass that threshold at which they can handle. So that tendon tolerance and muscular tolerance is a big one as well. And then the final one, the third one, is essentially just what I call like a generalized or general lack of stability within the shoulder joints. It's not necessarily anything that's super specific or super pinpoint. It's just in general, that rotator cuff and that joint complex just isn't stable because it hasn't been trained to be stable. That individual might be hypermobile. They might have too much flexibility. Whatever the reason may be, that joint on that deeper level just is not stable enough to handle the positions and the movements that archery is asking for, especially on a repetitive basis. So it's a generalized lack of stability.
Yeah. I think those are the things that I look at, and as I analyze, like Jason and I mean, we shoot together a lot, in preparation for every season, and we hunt together, obviously, and we watch each other, and we'll video each other shooting and doing, a lot of things, and it's second nature. You'll watch other guys shoot, and you watch how how they position themselves and things like that, and I think that. Yeah. The thing that happens is just like with anything else, like in Jason's world with baseball, if someone throws a strike, it doesn't mean that now that they're going to throw 100 strikes in a row. There is so much, day-to-day variance, right? Whether it's focus level, whether it's just not being fresh. I think a lot of times, I think him and I, between the two of us, I think we do a pretty decent job of like recognizing at times where you're just not always going to have the best day, and you're not always going to be just throwing darts, and hitting 12 rings and stuff like that. And there's a lot of days where I just know like that, I either don't have the focus level, and shooting 20 more arrows at that point isn't going to improve my my outcomes in that day and fix anything at that point, right? And so I think a lot of times I see people that they're just bound and determined, like I'm gonna shoot 5 more. I'm going to keep forcing it or whatever. And it's like I think a lot of times the best way forward is to sometimes take a step back and say, maybe I need some more rest. Maybe I shot 30 arrows today, and that's my threshold, right? Like you think about, as you mentioned, and I like that you use that word, which is tolerance, right? And the ability. I talk about it in sport all the time, where one of the biggest limiting factors in a lot of people and where injuries come up is a lack of tissue tolerance and not building up tissue tolerance in anything, regardless of what that activity is. Obviously, we're talking about archery. Guess what? There's going to be a point where it's going to be a limiting return on what you're putting into it if you don't have that tolerance. And I always use a quote where I say the difference between having a blister and having a callus, right? And the callus is basically the buildup of tolerance, right? You are building a tolerance to an activity or a specific thing that you're doing, whereas guess what? The person who goes out and says, I'm going to shoot 50 arrows a day no matter what, is going to end up with a blister because they're going to overuse. Their outcome is going to go downhill fast. Their frustration level goes up, and now all of a sudden, you know, they go from shooting 50 to like, I'm going to take a week off, right? Or whatever.
I mean, you've got some factors of mental fatigue that mix in there too, right?
Sure.
Not just the physical side of it. I know you know, especially when I start shooting early in the season, you know, my front shoulder gets tired of holding the dang bow steady all the time. You know, maybe I get 30 arrows, but then, you know, if I try and push past that threshold, then mentally I'm struggling, you know, and I'm starting to get frustrated with things, and it all builds up. So it's not just a singular, you know, fatigue level too. There's the physical and the mental side that goes along with it.
Yeah. I think that's why people love archery. You know, at the same time, it is such a component of all of those things, right? Like it requires you to have so many of your ducks in a row in order to execute well, and then execute consistently. And then even, you know, for us, like I think about as we start to approach a season, like shooting under fatigue, we do inoculation based training where we try to work our way up to shooting under better, you know, higher heart rates and you know, do drill work and stuff like that. We're fortunate in our facility that we have a range right outside, and we can go out and shoot out. We can shoot out to 60 yards right outside our door, and we train ourselves and other people that come and work out with us and things like that, where we'll put them through physical rigor in the weight room and go out and say, all right, we're going to shoot 2 arrows right now, right? And you know, and we'll change scenarios and things like that, and utilization of different you know, kind of formats in order to try and gradually build up that tolerance and gradually build up their ability to shoot, which will, you know, ultimately be under the most stressful situation that they can. And that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Like a lot of times you're like, I'm fresh, we're just going to go out and fire some downrange, and the next thing you know, it's like, guess what? That deer pops out, that bull pops out, or whatever, and that heart rate response, that fight or flight response goes up like crazy, and now all of a sudden, like, you're just hoping to hit the target. Like that is such a trained response as well. And I think a lot of people overlook that. We're like, oh man, I shot like 500 arrows, 600 arrows, 1,000 arrows going into the season, and then, man, I just, you know, didn't execute a good shot. And it's like, well, did you shoot under any
kind of duress,
stress, anything? And do you advocate for things like that in what you do as well?
Not so much. I will a little bit. Most of all because I try to stay focused in, we'll say, in my lane.
Sure.
You know, I am not a Western hunter, and I know that there are other people who have more experience in that and have are going to have more information and better application for it. So I don't do a lot with it. I think that there are other people that can address that as well as or better than I can. So I really try to stay focused on what I know really well and what I'm really confident in, and that's corrective exercise, fixing shoulders, fixing shoulder position, and preparing the archer physically.
Well, that's a breath of fresh air right there. I mean, who stays in their lane these days? Everybody's an expert at everything, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, I think that's important personally. You know, you know, I'm sure for you guys too. It frustrates me when, just like I said there, I think that you guys and others are more equipped and more prepared to teach and train and offer that than I am, and I'm totally happy with that. And just like I am confident in being able to fix a shoulder, improve a shoulder for the archer, but I get really frustrated when, you know, I see people, you know, diving into things that I know aren't up to par with what the people are going to need that they're working with or what they're offering. So I think that's important.
And I think the thing that I notice, and as I look at what kind of exists right now, right, where I believe there is a very viable and growing need and awareness factor that's going on within the hunting community that has started to recognize that, hey, this can be very demanding. This is a very physical, endeavor. Sure, you got your guys that go and, they're going to climb up in a tree stand. They're going to sit there. They're going to walk back out to their truck and whatever, and that's fine. I love all styles of hunting, and I don't. Like we waterfowl hunt. Jason and I kind of were talking about some things. We've got some meetings tomorrow with a group, and so we're diving into some of these things. But I think that aspect of it and what you're seeing is, there are a handful of select entities that are starting to work their way into this field as well, and as a professional, and this strength and conditioning piece for me is something I've done for 20 years, and much like yourself, bachelor's and master's degree in exercise science, and it's kind of, maybe I'm an idiot, but it took me this long to realize that there's a need that exists here for people, much like you identified as well. And I go, it's hard at times, and I'm the person that I'm not a big feather ruffler or whatever, where I'm going to go out and like call people out and other things like that, or I try not to, because I advocate for people to want to do these things, right? And I want them to have better experiences. And I think about the guy that comes from Wisconsin, or the guy that comes from like I mentioned, Tom from Missouri, and I'm like, man, I can't imagine driving 1,200 miles to come up to where we live and get your butt kicked, like you said, and not have the proper ammunition in this case being what guys like us can help these folks with in order to try and improve their experience, because guess what, the amount that you invest in the time and the money is astronomical. This is not a cheap,
and it's an easily overlooked item too.
Yes,
right? I can have all the best equipment. I got the best clothes. I got the best bow. I got the best guide and the best horse, but I'm not in the best shape.
Yeah.
And, 10,000 foot hunts are no joke.
Yeah. That's the thing we've talked about with guides and outfitters around is, how much they emphasize that aspect of clients, right? Like, hey, if and we've had outfitters tell us directly, the quality of the trophy that you're going to get, whether that's a mule deer hunt, on, a lower altitude or whatever, it doesn't even necessarily matter. They'll all tell you, we emphasize how important it is that you come physically prepared, because the trophy that you will harvest will have a direct correlator to that preparation. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that speaks volumes for what you're doing. I think it speaks volumes for hopefully what we're doing. I don't think, maybe we didn't nerd out as much. I think Jason's a little disappointed in us in that, but at the same time, I think that I think we touched on quite.
But it's good to be, to talk to a guy like yourself who's very like-minded in obviously preparing physically for a hunt, not just with equipment and training and shooting and things like that. And I think it's and it's just like in our regular jobs that we have here, it's like trying to convince people of the value of what the services that you're providing, and that the results are not going to be immediate. Right? This week, next week is not going to be when I'm going to see it. It's when I get to pull back on the animal of a lifetime, and I don't have pain, or I'm able to draw 10 pounds more, I can make a shot that's 10 yards further, whatever it might be, that's when it all pays off. So it's, there is some delayed satisfaction there, or gratification.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's, with a lack of a better way to put it, but it can be a tough sell. That's one of the unique things about fitness, is it's one of the only things in hunting that can help you that can't be bought necessarily, if that makes sense, right?
You can't just go on the shelf and pick it up.
Truthfully, it's one of the only things that I think can lift your hunt up and improve your hunt and improve your odds. That truly has to be worked for. Now, of course, everybody works hard for their paycheck and works hard to make a living, but in regards to something I can buy, like an upgrade on the rest on my bow, versus developing stamina, stamina in my legs, right? There's one there that is going to take more time and actual effort and work versus the other. So it is a tough sell, but it's, I think, also a very rewarding part of just being the best, well-rounded hunter that you can be. It's part of the process. I was just telling a friend the other day that, I love hunting itself. Like tonight I was in a tree stand. I love that part, but what I love just as much is preparing for getting to that point. What am I going to do for shooting? What am I going to do for prepping, scouting, training, all those different things. It's a way to make the whole hunting experience a little more wholesome for me, at least.
I think for us, as what I found is that the more that we have really started to invest in this, and the more that we've kind of dove head first, is I used to think of going hunting and things like that. I was like, oh well, it's fall, here we go, yay, we get to go hunting. And now we've expanded it so much in terms of how we approach it, which is the training and preparation, which is the shooting, which is the scouting.
Well, we don't have the luxury either of like just going out year round and hunting anywhere. Like we have a very small window of opportunity, and we want to try to take advantage of that opportunity. So, it's not like we have our regular jobs too, but we also live in the city. So it's not like it's that easy for me to go find some ducks or go on a deer hunt or something like that. So, We have to take advantage of those opportunities when we get them, and we feel like we need to be as prepared as possible.
Yeah, make them count, right? Simply put, make it count.
So. Well, we want to make sure that people know how to get a hold of you. As we mentioned at the top of the show here, Christian's pretty easy to find if you go to archerystrong.com. He has a host of things on there, all the different offerings and programs and things like that you have available, as well as contact information. We encourage you to reach out. Obviously, if you look on any of the social media outlets, Instagram and Facebook and things like that, again, just type in Archery Strong, you're going to find him there. The content that you're putting out is awesome. If you just scroll through and look at all of the things that you're providing and putting out there right now, and if you're someone who's ever picked up a bow and have felt like throwing it in the lake a time or two, I promise you that
join my golf clubs.
And join Jason's golf clubs. There's value there, and I encourage you to not only follow along, but reach out, because I think that you're bringing a lot to the archery world that people can take advantage of. And as you said, as much as I know about shoulder anatomy and things like that, I love the fact that you kind of like just pinpoint focused on this is what I'm going to really dive into and bring to people as something that could be very beneficial. And I think that those that are probably utilizing your services are seeing that, and I'm sure that the testimonials behind that will follow. So we really appreciate you joining us today. It's good to finally make this thing happen. Obviously, good luck as you're hunting, and we hope that maybe there'll be some follow up with that, and good luck. How many days do you get to hunt?
As far as now, as far as the next couple of days, I'm hunted tonight and most likely the next 2 nights. So it's the end of our whitetail season here, and was able to make a trip home, like I said, to my dad's little farm here back home in western Pennsylvania. So it was a good night to be out in a tree stand. It was nice to end the night by connecting with you guys and talking with you guys. Thank you for the kind words and the opportunity to have a good conversation. Thank you for anybody listening. And like you guys said, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody that just has questions or wants to know more about the process, what the goal is, what the focus is. So feel free to reach out via any social media or the web page at archery-strong.com. And been a good conversation, guys. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
We appreciate
it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. We'll look forward to seeing you next time, and make sure that you guys go out and check out Christian Archery Strong, as we will look forward to seeing you next time.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
And we're out.
I'm going to keep.
Our engineer had to leave, so he's.
Yeah.
We got to hit stop on the computer.
So yeah, he's we're still.
So whereabouts in Western PA are you?
Where I'm at right now, back home at my dad's house, is Mars, Butler area. It's about 45 minutes north of Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
And
so I played baseball up in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, for a season. I know that's Eastern PA, not quite Western PA, but
yeah, I just moved farther east, I guess to central Pennsylvania, like the Clearfield, DuBois area.
Okay.
If you've ever heard of that, kind of central PA.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Well, you got plenty of whitetail out there, then I'm sure.
Oh yeah, a lot of whitetail deer here, that's for sure. Yeah.
So very cool. Well, if you ever get out to Colorado,
are you coming out to TAC out here?
No, I'm not this year. Recently, like I said, bought a house up there, got married, and trying to get this business rolling. So it's pretty much full steam ahead. Nothing exciting planned for hunts or anything, but I'll get to enjoy Pennsylvania some this year. That's for sure.
Yeah, the married part puts a damper in things.
yeah, a little bit as far as the freedom, but she's a good gal, so it's turning out okay so far.
Then you just got to get her out in the field.
Yeah, that's true.
So, what? Now they have a TAC out close to you, right? Isn't there one in? Yeah,
there's one at it's called Seven Springs, PA. It's a ski resort, kind of southwest Pennsylvania, and I've been out to that one a couple of times. And have enjoyed that. I always enjoy shooting that with buddies. Last year it got canceled here, so we'll see what happens for this year.
Yeah, we went to. They finally got one in Colorado. We were originally going to go to the Terry Peak one because it was the closest to us, and so we were going to go up to South Dakota, and then they announced that they finally put one in Colorado at Sunlight Mountain. And for us, it's been one of those things where I kept asking, like, hey, when are you guys, along with you got probably hundreds of people, when are you guys going to put one of these in Colorado? And the main reason was that all the big resorts here are like, we don't need that. I mean, they're such massive entities. As far as the ski resorts and stuff here, they're like, that's a freaking drop in the bucket for us.
That makes sense.
So they couldn't get any of the resorts to really want to play ball with them, and then they finally kind of went down a little bit. Like Sunlight is a much smaller venue, and there's a handful of smaller venues as far as ski resorts go here, and they finally got one of them to play ball. And then I know, what's that other one, the Mountain Archery Fest?
Yeah, I've seen that. I've heard of that.
I think they did one in Purgatory out here last year too, so there was actually another one, but I've never talked to anybody that's gone to one of those. They look like they're pretty similar, but that last year was our first experience with it, and it was
a blast.
Awesome.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Kicked the crap out of us, but it was fun.
Yeah, it's a fun way to shoot with guys and shoot with friends.
Yeah,
that's for sure. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's an easy way to lose some arrows too.
The arrow vendors love it.
Oh, sure.
My gosh! Like we were talking about that too. It's just like we looked at. There was one shot that was like 83 yards downhill, and then a deer that was tucked in behind an aspen, and literally his vitals were butted next.
That was the elk. That was the elk one. That was the one I hit the tree, and you hit the elk. I hit the tree.
Yeah,
we were only about 6 inches apart.
And literally, we go down there, and there was probably 30, 40 arrows in that tree.
That poor tree.
And I'm like,
that almost cuts the tree in half.
Yeah. I'm going to bring an arrow puller with me next time.
Yeah.
I think it's a worthwhile investment.
So we just wonder. We were thinking about that. They were like, what the heck did they do when this is over? You can't imagine that the resort wants all those arrows just littered through trees out there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
It's kind of interesting, but anyway, that's a little bit of a digress.
We'll have to ask somebody there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyhow, well, I really appreciate your time, man. It's good to catch up with you, and you know, obviously, if there's anything that you know, ever kind of crosses our paths or you know, puts us in the same conversation, you know, we are always open to talk or help or do anything that might come along. And I was going to mention to you too, I don't know if you've ever looked at our YouTube page, but there's a little bit of irony, and now I kind of feel bad because it was over a year ago, probably a year and a half ago or so, we put together a little bit of a shoulder series, and I just, by complete circumstance, I'm like, we'll just call this the Archery Strong series. and then, you know, then shortly after that, I see, you know, you kind of, I found you or whatever on Instagram, and I'm like, later going back and editing things, I'm like, oh shit, I hope he doesn't get mad if I like thinks I stole that or something. So
yeah, no, I appreciate the thought. No, I haven't seen that. I don't poke around too much, but yeah, no, it's all good. No worries.
Okay, so we'll probably maybe change that up. But anyhow, well, we'll let you go. Good luck in the rest of the hunt, and like I said, if we can ever cross paths, or if you ever happen to be in our neighborhood or vice versa, you know, our doors are always open, and love to have you come out sometime if you ever thinking about it. We're happy to have you. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate the conversation. It's nice talking with you guys finally and meeting you guys. So certainly in the future, if there's any opportunities or anything that comes up, I'll be excited to reconnect with you guys. But for now, thank you for the conversation. That's great. You know, any opportunity to get some more information out there and reach more people is a win for me. So.
Well, I know one of the things that is definitely kind of on our radar, we actually, we're about a year ago now, was we had planned to hold a live event, and we were going to go through and do, we had like Jason Phelps was going to come out, we had Kenton Claremont from Train to Hunt was coming out, and we had a whole host of everything, like in terms of we were going to do, you know, the training, backcountry tactics, shooting and all that. And so that's one of the things that I really want to develop. And, you know, if we can actually get to where we can build that. And the problem was is that we were in the process of moving from one facility to the other, and the timing of it just didn't happen. And we actually had already been taking registration and the whole 9 yards. Is I kind of want to resurrect that, hopefully with the assumption that we're all going to have, you know, the ability to, you know, see people in the flesh, you know, soon. And
one day it'll happen again.
Right. But if we do, I would definitely love to engage you as being, you know, part of something like that, where you come out and kind of, you know, talk about that aspect of it and all the components, and we kind of want to put it into, you know, it would be like a weekend event type deal, and get as many avenues of it as possible. So just kind of like throw that one over the bow towards you, as you know, you definitely be on that list when we do it. So
yeah, definitely. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah,
so
for sure.
Cool, man.
Awesome.
Well, have a good night, and we'll keep in touch for sure.
Awesome, guys. Thank you again. I really appreciate it.
All right.
No worries. Take care.
Take care. See ya.
All right. See you guys.